Hey everybody, welcome to week 5 in the Breakthrough study. Let's jump right in. You know the drill by now. We can get started with the icebreaker and the what to expect section, and I'll see you right after that. Now it's time to jump into the video message for today, so make sure you have something to take notes with, and let's watch today's video message.
Team. I want to jump right into the story. Esther chapter 2, verse 5 through 7 is where we're going to begin. It's right there in your notes if you're following along. But the book of Esther really isn't very long. You can read it in about 30 minutes. I encourage you to take time to do that. Esther chapter 2, read along. It says, "Now there was a Jew who lived in the palace complex in Susa. His name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite. His ancestors had been taken from Jerusalem with the exiles and carried off with King Jehoiakim of Judah by King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon into exile." Everyone has gone into exile. All of the Jews had been moved out of their home country. And Mordecai had reared his cousin Hadassah, otherwise known as Esther. Since she had no father or mother, the girl had a good figure and a beautiful face. After her parents died, Mordecai adopted her. Here's Esther following her culture, following her people. They've been completely exiled. They're living in a country not their own. She's living with a cousin because her parents passed on. She had been adopted. She was completely out of place. And I want you to hear this kind of out the gate before we fill in a blank, before we go far, that if you feel overlooked, you feel like you're a complete accident, you feel like you're Esther, I want you to hear this. God has so much more for you. He has a place for you. David figured this out in Psalm 33:11. He says this. He says, "The plans of the Lord stand firm." How long? Forever. "The purposes of his heart through all generations." There has never been a generation, nor will there ever be a generation that God is not working his purpose in. And you have not been left out. For me, I have not been left out. I want you to hear this as we're going in, that we want to help you find your place. We want to make it easy for you. And so we're going to study the life of Esther just a little bit. I believe that she can speak to us very, very clearly. Here's the first point if you're taking notes with me. Number 1, finding your place requires great faith and trust. There's always going to be ambiguity. There's always going to be uncertainty in our lives. It will be that way until we stand next to Jesus face to face. I wish it weren't so. I wish it all worked out. I wish there was just clarity in every moment, but I want you to know that really is heaven. Esther would tell us finding your place is going to require faith and trust. Esther chapter 2, verse 17, following along with the story, it says, "Now the king was attracted to Esther more than to any of the other women. She won his favor and approval more than any of the other virgins. So he set a royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti." Here's this moment. They had a beauty contest. The previous queen, Vashti, had disobeyed the king, and so he outed her. Said, "You're out. You're not going to do what I say." And so he holds a beauty contest, and he wants the prettiest girl to be his bride, and Esther wins. And that could almost be confusing because you would think, well, then is my purpose just to be pretty? And it wasn't. God had so much more than that. It was kind of like one of those bait and switch situations. She won it, only to recognize that God had so much more for her there. Listen, no place is out of place when you're in God's place. You might want to write that down somewhere. No place is out of place when you're in God's place, when He has something for you. And I don't mean to be Captain Obvious here, but you're here. You really can't be anywhere else right now. You can't run. I mean, you're right here, so might as well be in the moment. It may require some faith and trust, but faith is believing that God is working in your current circumstance for you. Trust is knowing that He is going to be true to what He said about you in every circumstance and every situation. But I want you to know you're not going to find your place if you're unwilling to have a little bit of faith and trust in God. Listen, I want you to know it actually requires less faith to believe in God than it does to believe that you're an accident. When you do a little bit of study looking at a lot of popular theories, I want you to know that Esther would say, you know what, I put my faith on God, that you're here on purpose. Psalm 31, 14 and 15, David says, but I trust in you, O Lord. I say you are my God, and my times are in your hands. David had the faith and trust that God was taking care of him and working in his life. The second thing you're going to need to do, if you're going to make it, to find your place, finding your place will always require great courage. There's going to be this moment where all the ambiguity and all the uncertainty shows up, and you're trying to figure out what you're going to do, and you're going to have to overcome that fear. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is what you do in spite of the fear. Courage is stepping up to the edge and saying, you know what, I'm going to go. I'm going to trust. I know that he's got a plan for me. I know that I can run after him. The story goes for Esther that this guy Haman, he had a big issue with Esther's uncle Mordecai, who had adopted her. He had such a big issue that Haman decided that he was going to trick the king into killing all the Jews. And so the king passes a law that says on a certain day, anyone can kill all of the Jews. And so Mordecai comes to Esther and says to her, do you know what's going on? Do you know this situation? Here she is. She just won the beauty contest. She's in the king's palace. And Uncle Mordecai comes in and says, hey, if you don't step up, we're not going to make it. All of a sudden, placed on her shoulders was this huge responsibility. Listen to the words that Mordecai speaks to her. Esther says, do not think, Esther, that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to royal position for such a time as this. It's one of the most famous lines out of the book of Esther, that for such a time as this, that she was placed there to step up and have courage and meet others. My dad, years ago when I was a kid, he liked to teach us about faith, and he's a pastor of a small church in South Louisiana, and one time he was talking to me about faith and trust and courage, this kind of the same concept, and I wasn't getting it. I was just a little kid, and so he walks me into the kitchen. He puts me on the counter, and he steps back like 4 or 5 spaces. It felt like a mile from him, and he says, "Jump." I'm thinking, you're nuts, you know? Jump, and he says, "You could trust Daddy. Have courage. Jump." And so eventually I jumped, and he caught me, and there was a great lesson learned. And so here I am, a young father. I'm thinking, you know, I want to teach my son this, my 3-year-old Caleb. I'm gonna you can imagine how this goes, okay? And so we go to the park, and there's this kind of wall that kind of tapers away, and there's a walk path underneath, and he starts walking, and right as we start, we're kind of at the same level, and we keep walking, and Caleb, my 3-year-old, keeps going. He's looking at Daddy, he's looking back, and he just keeps going. I'm thinking, you know what? He's going far, and all of a sudden, his feet are higher than my head. And I remember what my dad did with me. I said, "Caleb, you trust Daddy? Just jump." You should have seen those little 3-year-old legs start to shake just a little bit. Here's the deal. He finally took the leap of faith. He trusted me. He had the courage to jump off. And I'm telling you, there was such a sweet moment there as a father holding my son when he trusted me and he jumped into my arms. The only problem is now he thinks that counts at anywhere. He thinks I'm going to catch him at any moment. So the other day I'm laying on the floor and he starts doing this WWE thing off the sofa, and he just comes off and almost kills me, all right? Finding your place is going to require that kind of courage to get over that moment where the knees are knocking and trust that God's going to work it out for you. I love this verse out of Psalm chapter 41. David says, "Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed." Isaiah is actually quoting Jesus. He says, "Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." It's a great picture of our Father. If you have the courage to jump, He's going to catch you. He's going to be there with you. You can count on it. He will take care of you in every circumstance and every situation. Here's the third thing I'd love for you to write down from Esther's life. Finding your place requires great focus on God. When you start to talk about your purpose, there's this point where it feels like it's all about you. Well, you say, well, for heaven's sakes, Pastor, it's my purpose. Isn't it supposed to be about me? But Esther would say it's going to require you to kind of take your eyes off of you and focus on God. Look what Esther did, chapter 4, verse 15 and 16. It says, then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai. Go gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. And I and my maids will fast with you as you do. Here's what she did. Instead of saying, you know what, I'm in this palace, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, I'm out of place. Instead of turning away from God, she turned her attention toward God. And I want you to know that there is this process of discovering what God has placed inside of you, which feels like looking at me. It's inward. But there's a part where you got to say, you know what, I'm not going to look at me so much, and I'm going to look at you, God. He's the designer. We like to say around here that He has designed you for a destiny. So He placed inside of you all the things you would need, but He wants you to look to Him to discover it. Proverbs 25:2 says it this way. It says it's God's privilege to conceal things and the king's privilege to discover them. It's our privilege to discover what God has placed inside of us. Now, I don't know why He doesn't make everything evident. I don't know about you, but I really just wish God would just say it to me plain. In most cases, He said a lot in the Bible, so maybe He's counting on that, bringing the clarity to my life. But sometimes I was like, God, why won't you just make it clear? And I think sometimes He does it just to mess with us, you know. I know that doesn't feel good, but sometimes I think He's doing it to build the faith, the trust, and the courage. But I want you to turn your attention toward God, not away from Him. Please don't get distracted with yourself so much that you miss the point that our purpose is from God, that our calling is from God, that we were made in His image. All of us. Fearfully and wonderfully made. Here's the fourth thing that I think finding your place will require. The fourth thing is that finding your place requires great initiative. There's going to come a moment where you're going to have to take the big leap. You're going to have that courage in your heart and that focus on God, but you're going to have to take the step. To simply quote Nike, you're just going to have to do it. Listen, no one else can fulfill your purpose because it's your purpose. No one else can take the steps for you. You've got to do it. Sometimes we've got to just step back, look at the big leap and say, you know what, I'm going to do it. Esther chapter 4, verse 16, here's her word. She says, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. Listen to that resolve and initiative. Listen to the clarity that came from focusing on God. Listen to what happened to her. She set aside all worry. She set aside what it was going to look like, and she said, if I die, I die. Winston Churchill was a great leader who was faced with great opposition. I found this great quote from him, and I'd love to read it to you. He says, in every age there comes a time when a leader must come forward to meet the needs of the hour. Therefore, there is no potential leader who does not have an opportunity to make a positive difference in society. He says, tragically, there are times when a leader does not rise to the hour. He says it's a tragedy that when there's an opportunity in front of us to go after what God has placed out there, God's purpose, that we would not take the initiative to jump out there and reach the goal. Maybe you have a dream for a job. Maybe you have a place you feel like you're called and it's just not working out. You feel, it's like they've overlooked you for the promotion. They've left you out completely. I want to say to you very, very clearly, you got to take the step. Have the faith and trust in God. Have courage. Focus on God, not yourself, but take the step. What you're going to find is that He's there when you take the step. He's there after the step. He's walking with you in every situation. He is taking care of you in the moment, working for your behalf.
Now it's time to get into your discussion questions, so you can go ahead, hit stop, and enjoy your discussion time.